The smell of smoke clung to the air like a curse, and the only thing louder than the crackling flames was the desperate scream of a mother. But amidst the chaos, no one noticed the maid sprinting toward the inferno, barefoot, heart pounding, not for her life, but for a child who wasn't hers. And when she finally pulled the millionaire's son from the fire, she thought the worst was over, until she heard two chilling words that shattered her world. Nina Cooper had never dreamed of living a grand life. She'd been raised in the outskirts of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, by her grandmother who believed in two things: hard work and compassion. At 29, Nina found herself working in a sprawling estate in Connecticut as a live-in maid for the Crawford family, wealthy, powerful, and guarded. The Crawfords owned everything in sight: luxury cars, imported marble floors, a garden the size of a city block. But to Nina, none of that glittered more than little Brandon Crawford, the 5-year-old son of Logan and Rachel Crawford. Brandon had a speech delay and severe anxiety, but for some reason, he connected with Nina in a way he didn't with anyone else. He'd hide behind her skirt when guests came over and curl up beside her while she cleaned the library. Rachel Crawford barely noticed Nina. She was polite but cold, like someone forced to acknowledge a mosquito on her arm. Logan, a venture capitalist, was usually buried in meetings or overseas. They had money, influence, and rooms they didn't even know existed. But they didn't have time for their son. Nina made up for it as best she could. She taught Brandon how to pronounce his R sounds with songs and games. She learned how to soothe his panic attacks with lavender oil and lullabies. She cooked special meals just for him and read him bedtime stories when Rachel had other things to do. Nina knew she wasn't family, but she gave Brandon everything she had, because love, she believed, didn't require a title. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything changed. The Crawfords were hosting a charity garden party for New York's elite. The backyard bloomed with pastel tents, live jazz, and chefs crafting dishes too fancy to name. Nina, as always, was behind the scenes, organizing place cards, arranging flowers, and keeping Brandon in her line of sight. He'd been wearing a tiny navy blue suit that made him look like a miniature businessman. Nina had just handed him a juice box when she smelled the smoke. At first, she thought it was a grill. But within seconds, screams erupted from the east wing of the house. The library. Brandon's favorite room. Nina didn't hesitate. She dropped the vase she was holding and sprinted. Guests parted like water, too stunned or too self-important to help. She yanked off her heels mid-run, her feet slapping against the stone patio, her lungs already burning from the smoke. When she reached the library, flames were licking the curtains, and thick black smoke curled along the ceiling like a living beast. "Brandon," she screamed, coughing as she pushed the door open. There he was. Frozen in the far corner, clutching a plush dinosaur, eyes wide with terror. "Nina," he shrieked, his small voice nearly drowned by the roar of the flames. She didn't think. She just ran. The heat clawed at her skin as she barreled through the room. Her arm caught fire for a moment, she didn't feel it. She grabbed Brandon, cradled him against her chest, and turned back through the fire. A ceiling beam cracked and fell inches from her head. She spun away just in time. By the time she reached the lawn, her dress was singed, her face streaked with soot, and her lungs screamed with each breath. But Brandon was safe. He was safe. Paramedics rushed in, taking Brandon from her arms. Someone wrapped a blanket around her, another shoved an oxygen mask on her face. She was shaking, but her eyes never left Brandon. Rachel Crawford pushed through the crowd, her silk gown trailing ash. She scooped Brandon into her arms, crying, not out of relief, but rage. How could this happen? She screamed at no one. Nina stood up on wobbly legs, walking over. "He's okay now," she said hoarsely. "He's okay." Rachel turned to her sharply. Her perfectly made-up face twisted. "You let him go inside alone?" Nina blinked. "I didn't, he must have wandered off." You had one job. Rachel hissed. One. Before Nina could explain, a security guard stepped in front of her. Step back, he said. Mrs. Crawford asked everyone to clear the area. I'm his nanny, Nina protested, her voice raw. Your staff, the guard said bluntly. Please step back. She took a shaky step backward, heart cracking in places she didn't know it could. Her eyes followed Brandon, now carried toward the ambulance, sobbing and calling for her. But she wasn't allowed near him. An hour later, Nina sat on a bench near the driveway, a paramedic dressing her arm in silence. The fire had been controlled. The party was over. Rachel and Logan had left with Brandon. No one had asked Nina if she was okay. She stared at the smoke rising in the distance. The home she'd kept spotless for 2 years now bore black scars on its side, like the ones she felt forming inside her. Then Logan returned. He stepped out of a black SUV, his face hard and unreadable. He was a tall man, handsome in a way that came from generations of wealth and tailored suits. But today, he looked smaller somehow. Nina stood when she saw him. Mr. Crawford, she said. Is Brandon? He raised a hand. He's alive because of you. She nodded, blinking rapidly. I didn't even think. He was in there and... You saved my son, he interrupted. There's no way to repay that. She exhaled, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I'm just glad he's okay. But then Logan added 2 words that made her blood run cold. You're fired. Nina stood frozen, the words echoing in her mind like a cruel joke. You're fired. For a moment, she thought she misheard. Maybe the ringing in her ears from the fire was distorting things. But Logan's face was unmoved. Stoic. Like he was delivering a business memo, not tearing apart the life of the woman who had just risked everything for his son. I don't understand, Nina stammered. You just said I saved him. You did, Logan replied. And we're grateful. Truly. But this situation, it's complicated. She looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Complicated? I ran into a burning building for your child. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait for someone else. I could have died. And you're a hero, he cut in, his voice tighter now, trying to maintain control. But Rachel believes you neglected your duties. She thinks Brandon got into the library because you weren't watching him. You know how she is. Nina couldn't believe what she was hearing. So that's it. You're letting me go because your wife is upset. Logan sighed, almost apologetically. We'll make sure you get a generous severance. 6 months of pay. A glowing letter of recommendation. Anything you need. But you can't come back to the house. Rachel won't allow it. Nina didn't care about the money. She didn't even care about the job anymore. All she could think about was Brandon, his chubby fingers clinging to hers, the way he looked up at her when he was scared. The way he screamed her name when the fire closed in. And now she couldn't even say goodbye. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. I didn't leave him alone. He slipped away while I was helping your guests. I would never. I love that boy. Logan's jaw clenched. For the first time, emotion flickered in his eyes. I believe you, he said. But love isn't enough to fight Rachel. Nina turned away, her heart twisting like a damp rag. She walked down the long driveway with no shoes, no suitcase, and a hollow silence trailing behind her. She didn't cry. Not then. Her tears came later, in the small motel room she paid for with her last $100. The room smelled like mildew and hopelessness. She lay curled on the bed, replaying the fire in her mind over and over. The flames. Brandon's terrified face. The weight of him in her arms. And then those 2 words. You're fired. 3 weeks passed. Nina tried applying for other nanny jobs, but nothing worked out. References from anyone but the Crawfords didn't carry much weight in elite circles. And when potential employers called the Crawfords, they were told there had been a situation and that Nina was no longer with them. It didn't take long for the phone calls to stop coming. She picked up a part-time cleaning job at a diner and started taking night shifts mopping floors at a school. Her days bled together, a haze of chemicals and exhaustion. But still, she thought of Brandon every night. She wondered if he asked for her. If he cried. If he thought she abandoned him. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, Nina stepped out of the school just after midnight and found someone waiting for her by the bus stop. It was Logan. His coat was soaked through, his face pale, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "What are you doing here?" she asked, instantly alert. "I needed to see you," he said. "I don't work for you anymore." "I know. But Brandon hasn't spoken a word since the fire." Nina's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, literally nothing. Not to me, not to his mother, not even to his therapists. He doesn't eat properly, doesn't sleep. All he does is hold that same stuffed dinosaur you pulled him out with and cry into it." Nina looked away, tears welling in her eyes. I told you I never left him alone." Logan stepped closer, his voice raw. "I know. And I didn't fight for you the way I should have. I'm sorry." Silence settled between them, broken only by the patter of rain on the sidewalk. "I came here because I want to hire you back," he said finally. "Not as a maid. Not even as a nanny. I want you to be Brandon's caretaker, his primary one. In your own space. Away from the house. I'll pay for everything, apartment, expenses. I just need you to help him heal." Nina blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. "What about Rachel?" "She's not living with us right now," Logan admitted. "She left last week. Said she needed space to reassess everything. Honestly, I think losing control of the narrative drove her away. She couldn't handle that our son only felt safe with someone else." Nina hesitated. Her heart screamed yes, but a part of her remembered how easily they cast her aside. "You fired me without even asking what happened," she said softly. "You listened to the wrong voice." "I did," Logan said, stepping forward. "But I'm listening to Brandon now." He held out a small envelope. Inside was a photo, Brandon, holding his dinosaur, a crayon drawing in his hand. In shaky, crooked letters, the paper read, "Nina, come back." Her breath hitched. She took the envelope and clutched it to her chest. "When can I see him?" she asked. Logan smiled through the rain. "Tonight." The apartment Logan provided was modest but warm, nestled in a quiet neighborhood not far from a private pediatric therapy center. It had soft rugs, pastel walls, and a playroom filled with everything Brandon loved, from dinosaur puzzles to weighted blankets. But all of that paled in comparison to what really mattered. Nina was there. Logan brought Brandon over the following evening. The boy clung to his father's leg at the door, his eyes tired, his lips pressed together in a tight, silent line. His dinosaur plush was nearly falling apart, clutched tightly in one hand. The moment he saw Nina, he froze. She knelt down on the carpet, opened her arms, and whispered, "Hi, baby." Brandon didn't move for a few seconds. Then he dropped his toy and ran into her arms, sobbing. Nina held him, her own tears falling freely now. She kissed his head, stroked his hair, and rocked him back and forth like she had every night before everything fell apart. "I missed you," she whispered. Brandon didn't speak, but he didn't let go. Not for a full hour. Over the next few weeks, something beautiful happened. Brandon began to speak again. Slowly, cautiously, but steadily. His first word was, "Nina." Then, "home." Then a full sentence, "Don't go." Nina poured herself into helping him heal. They built a daily rhythm, morning music therapy, quiet reading afternoons, drawing time, and calming lavender baths. She worked with his therapists closely, using every technique she'd learned and instinct she'd sharpened over the years. Logan visited daily, often bringing groceries or reading stories at bedtime. He was different now, quieter, more present. Less like the unreachable man in $1,000 suits and more like a father trying to learn how to love better. One night, after Brandon had fallen asleep, Logan lingered. "Do you ever think about what happened?" he asked as Nina tidied the bookshelves. "Every day," she said, glancing at him. "But not in the way you might think. I don't think about the fire. I think about how easy it was to be erased." Logan nodded slowly. "I deserved that." She turned to him fully. "You did." There was a long pause. "I never told you," he said quietly, "but that night, when you pulled him from the flames, do you know what Brandon said the next morning? The first thing, before we knew he could even talk again." Nina shook her head. "He said, 'Nina came back for me.'" Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking fast. "You didn't just save him from fire," Logan continued. "You saved him from loneliness. From feeling invisible." Nina folded her arms across her chest, trying to steady herself. "He saved me, too." Months passed. Brandon grew stronger, and so did Nina. She began taking child development classes online, hoping to pursue a certification in behavioral therapy. Logan supported her every step of the way, setting up tutors and even encouraging her to start a small foundation for trauma-informed caregiving. They spent more time together, family dinners, movie nights, long walks through the park. What began as cautious co-parenting turned into something quieter, deeper. A partnership built on mutual respect and healing. One warm spring afternoon, Brandon was running across the grass with a bubble wand, laughing. His laughter carried like sunlight through the breeze. Nina sat beside Logan on a bench, watching him with a peaceful smile. "You ever think about how strange life is?" Logan asked. "All the time," Nina said. "I used to think power was having influence over people. But it's not," he said. "It's loving someone enough to protect their joy. You taught me that." She smiled faintly. "You learned it because you were ready to." He looked at her, quiet for a beat. "I want this forever. You. Brandon. Us." Nina turned to him, startled. "I know it's a lot," he said quickly. "And maybe it's too soon. But I had to say it." She didn't respond with words. She took his hand, squeezing it gently, and leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, she felt at home. A year later, a small article ran in the Hartford Herald. Local maid saves child from fire, becomes advocate for child trauma care. But Nina didn't care about headlines. She cared about the little boy who now ran freely through her home, whose laughter echoed through her days. She cared about the man who had once let her fall, but then came back to lift her higher than she'd ever been. And she cared about the truth she had learned the hard way. That sometimes, the people we love most are the ones we fight hardest for. Even when they break us. Even when they let us down. Because real love is not what survives the flames. It's what rises from the ashes.